Very good. Very good. All right. Well, just like we like to do, we're going to jump right into things. So, welcome to our podcast, Ask an Angel. And today we're with Matan. And Matan, just to jump right into it, love you to share a little bit about yourself, your background, kind of where you are today, where you're going, and then one thing about you that no one would know.
Oh, gosh. So, a little bit about me. I'm an entrepreneur and I come from a family of entrepreneurs, small business owners and the like. And I've always been around, people trying to build businesses. So it's kind of obvious for me to go into a career of venture capital. If I was ever able to pull it off, it seemed like a dream career for me. So I kind of built myself towards that goal very early on. Started a couple of businesses when I was younger, always got involved in family businesses whenever I could. I actually worked for a family business since I was like 14. Until I graduated from university. And my first real job, after I graduated and came back from a year of traveling and let's call it spiritual investigations, I landed an internship at a boutique Toronto venture capital firm, unpaid internship. Did that for about 4 months and was fortunate enough to be hired full time. And did that for several years before quitting to start my own startup. Did that for a couple of years and joined Verstra Ventures about a little over 2 years ago now. Verstra is a pretty unique venture capital group. We're very small, very young, about 3 years old. We're the venture capital initiative of a much larger publicly traded company called Constellation Software. And Constellation is by many metrics, one of Canada's largest tech companies, publicly traded. They're business models to go around the world buying up software businesses. So over the last few years, they've considered deploying capital in different ways. And one of those ways has been venture capital, which is now Verstra Ventures, or one of the ways is now Verstra Ventures.
I love it. That's awesome. And I believe in what you got, your partner at Verstra Ventures, and the gentleman's name is is it Carl?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I met Carl a couple of years ago. So amazing. Very small world. And one thing about you that no one would know.
My gosh. I keep the Sabbath, maybe. I mean, a lot of people know that, but I guess in the professional world, very few people know that. But I keep the Sabbath, Friday, sundown, I'm out. I'm not touching anything until Saturday night. And it's quite great.
Actually, that's amazing. I think I might do that. I think it's a great way to get yourself out of the mix and decompress and get back into the swing of things back on Saturday night or Sunday.
Yeah, I actually saw a few years ago, or maybe 10 years ago, or something like that. There was a movement in the US called a Day of Unplug, where they said just for like 2 hours or something in the evening on Friday or Saturday or something, completely secular thing, had nothing to do with religion, and just stop using your phone. And people that adopted this saw a tremendous improvement in a lot of things, including, their ability to focus with friends and family and re-energize.
Oh, the re-energize and focus is huge. I used to, and still do, when I would travel, I would always say that I need to climb a mountain in order to get myself off of the phone so I can disconnect and actually participate in something where I can't be connected to, which is the same as my background and why I was actually climbing a mountain. But over the years, I just love climbing, but it helps you refocus, re-energize. So all great things. And my last travels was in Israel, and I got to experience, I guess it would have been 18 months ago, get to experience the Sabbath, because again, you're used to Sundays kind of in North America that you don't really do anything, which is more now than ever. But before, every day of the week was busy. So being in Israel for a couple of months was pretty amazing. So I got to see that, the startup community, and learn about just a different way of lifestyle, which is shutting things down and not being so active. And I think that's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Well, what took you to Israel? Was it the startup scene specifically?
Every year, I actually take 4 to 6 weeks and I travel. So I grab a backpack and I just bounce through countries. And this year I was in the Middle East. So I was in Egypt, Israel, and Jordan, and at a couple spots in between. But through that, while I was going around, I certainly I go and see startup scenes everywhere. So I've been in the startup scene all over the world, so I got to see some amazing startups. And one of our major centers is actually Israel. So we get a lot of deal flow from Israel. They've massive, amazing startup scene.
That's great. That's great. I hope you enjoyed your time there. It sounds like you did.
Oh, totally. To me, Israel in certain pockets is like Toronto was probably 15 years ago. In a massive rebuild, everything's kind of going through this new design, new architecture, new look, which is kind of what Toronto went through. So kind of Toronto's on that middle ground of that change, I guess, but very similar in that instance. So in Tel Aviv, that is. The other cities aren't really going through that type of change, but Tel Aviv certainly is. And it's pretty much the epicenter of Israel, right?
Yeah, certainly the commercial center. I mean, if you go to, I spent about a year living in the old city of Jerusalem. I think they have like zoning bylaws there that you can only build buildings with a certain stone.
Yep.
It's probably not going to change for a long time, but it's amazing. You can go to like Tel Aviv, which is a completely different culture than Jerusalem, and really the same country, and they live in harmony. It's pretty amazing.
Oh, agreed. Jerusalem was very orthodox, very more calm, less crazy buildings, less anything. Just everything is very well, nicely built, really impressive. And then Tel Aviv is active, totally different scene. Everybody's having fun. People walking around playing guitars. Like it literally is completely different. But it's they're both amazing for culture. So.
Yeah, I don't know. I remember the first time I went after I moved. I was born in Israel, and went a couple of times with family when I was younger. But the first time I went as like a, let's call it cognizant adult, I was 18, so not really an adult, but legally an adult. I remember going to the beaches in Tel Aviv, and it was such a culture shock. You see people with like rifles and bikinis, like you have people in bikinis. It's an amazing scene.
Yeah, that is. I noticed that a lot too, taking buses and trains, and it is a little bit different to see that. Philippines has the same. Everybody walks around with army fatigue and AKs and like a lot of different views, but very similar, I guess. But at the same time, it's still it feels pretty safe, pretty normal, pretty exciting. People are very active, getting out there. And like I said, I met with so many startups, and it was the energy and the ideas. It kind of felt like Israel's startup scene is like NASA. Everybody is working on some real deep, high-tech adventure compared to most of the places I've been. So I'm going to guess due to some of the military and due to other aspects, but a lot of stuff was really cool, like building a Land Rover. Not every startup's getting into that or even thinking about it. So there was some really cool tech that was coming out of it. So it was exciting to be there.
Cool.
So one of the areas I kind of want to steer back to, and I think you touched on a little bit about your entrepreneurial background, kind of when you were younger, working in the family business, and then driving into your own entrepreneurial experiences and then the VC world. But one thing that I found fascinating is that, one, you have a crossover. So you have been an entrepreneur, you've worked in the entrepreneurial space, and you've been a VC, and you've basically been a VC, I'd probably say longer than you've been an entrepreneur. And what I love about this, because most people that jump into this space, they were either all in on entrepreneurship or they were all in on VC, and very few have that crossroad. So there's a lot of learnings that you can bring into both aspects. So maybe you can touch on a little bit of when you started off on the VC side, what really got you into the VC world? What was that reason you chose to go in that direction? And was it because of the schooling, the finance, that you wanted to be in this space? But what was that kind of driver? Because I think it's really fascinating. There's a lot of people out there today, young people that are going in this. It's like one of the fastest spaces right now for university students to graduate and go into VC programs because they want to learn about this. What was that driving force for you 10 years ago to get you into the VC world?
The reason I got into the venture world, let's say there's a few reasons. I'd say at the outset, you're an entrepreneur, you think, okay, I like being involved in a single company, but wouldn't it be much better to be involved in 10 companies at the same time, So I would say that would be the very mature perspective that I once had, that I always wanted to be involved in many things at the same time. Just my entrepreneurial nature. You get bored after, 6 months doing the same thing. You want to kind of always be involved in something new. I'd say as I've developed more experience, there's two main reasons that I'm in the VC game. One is it's an amazing career to be able to, it's your job. It's my job to essentially meet the next founders of, let's call it plus $100 million or $1 billion companies. That's my job. So I have to find incredible people before other people find them. It's an amazing thing. Like I'm forced to kind of find amazing people and partner with them and give them money to build their vision. I don't think you get that with almost anything else. Like what other career can you have that experience dealing with such people? I think on the other front of it, aside from my interest in building companies, is more abstract. I've learned about Malthusian economics. I'm not going to get into it here, but essentially without technology and without investing and developing technology, there's kind of a limit to what human beings can achieve. If we have our populations growing exponentially, but our resources growing arithmetically and capping at a certain point, the only way to continue to allow human beings to flourish is with the continuous development of technology. And so long as we do that, we can have more people can live much better lives, healthier lives, can have access to food, have much higher quality of living. And I think a lot of the progress humanity has made over the last couple hundred years was due to technological development. And at some point, there was someone investing in that. And more in a philosophical sense, I want to be part of that. I want to be part of, I don't want to be cliche, but actually, and I'm not going to say it. I want to be part of that. I was going to say, because I saw Silicon Valley before, making the world a better place is like one of these cliches that investors say. So I'm going to avoid that.
Well, that's good. And what I liked about what you shared there is that this wasn't something that you just tripped on or decided that, tomorrow I'm going to be a VC. It sounds like you've been planning this for a long time. You saw what it took to do this, and you started to work your career, your education to be able to step into this and make this something you wanted to do as a lifetime and for a lifetime. And I commend you for that. My brain thinks the exact same way. So I'm excited that we both kind of have that same vision and direction. I always tell people that I don't want the biggest yacht in the ocean. I want to have 1 million small boats, because those boats can keep building themselves up and growing and moving. And that to me is more exciting, the fleet and being able to work with a lot of great people. You learn a lot more. And if we all have ADHD, well, this is one way to solve that. You're always going to be able to bounce around and continue to help and make that work and grow. So kind of as you've been, I guess, working your way through this environment, there's some, we'll call it VC fallacies for startups. And I'll always hear this, and I'd love to learn more about how you see this working and kind of what that process looks like for early stage companies. So I'm a new company, I'm looking for funding, and I'm out pitching VCs. So can you kind of break through what you see as the right way to do this, and when should a VC be involved? And how does that process work for you guys?
Yeah, so there's a lot of mistakes, I will say, founders make when they go out to raise money. And it's expected, especially if it's the first time doing it. Early stage companies or first time founders, you expect a lot of these mistakes. And most people like me give a lot of grace. A lot of goodwill is given out because we expect that these mistakes are being made. Let me start with this. There's a big misconception amongst founders that VCs are like taking risks. I don't think that's true. I'm not that kind of person. Most of the people I know that make investments in the space they don't look at risk in the sense of we're just going to gamble our investors' money on this company. That's not the way it works. Every investment we make, we expect it to be successful, and we want it to be successful. And we're doing everything we can to mitigate the risk as much as possible. I would say the better understanding is we have a risk-adjusted way of looking at investments, right? And I think founders need to understand that if a founder comes to us and they're not willing to put their grandmother's life savings into their business, there's a problem. Now, I'm not saying they should do that. I'm saying that they should be willing to do that because they're so confident that they've tied down all their risks, that they've thought through what they're doing. They're going to treat their investors' money in a sacred way. Like, this is not just some nameless fund. These are people's money that you're taking, and you're a steward of their capital now. And that's the way I look at it. I always look at any investment we do as if it's my personal money, my life savings, or the life savings of people I really care about. And that gets you thinking in really strong terms of all the practical things you want to make sure the business has. So I would recommend any founder, when you go out and raise money, before you do that, go through that process. Pretend like you're asking your grandmother to put money in your business and all their life savings, and see what you come up with. That's the first thing. There's many things like that. Like, I can give you a few more. Like, be prepared. A lot of founders we meet are not quite prepared to go through the process, and that could take on a few forms. One, they don't have a data room set up with high quality information on their business. Their pitch has not been refined sometimes in terms of content, design, delivery. They haven't thought through a lot of the issues like competition or market size, or if they've thought it through, there's a lot of holes in it, which, groups like yours or other accelerators or incubators or consultants could really help with. But that's something we've noticed a lot, that, the early stage you go and the less experienced the founder, there's just a lot of gaps in how they approach investors. One thing they should know is that if the material isn't there, it's hard for us to make a decision. The goal should be to make it as easy as possible for us to make a decision, because we get inundated with opportunities. And it's a bit of a bias, but the companies with higher quality data, we tend to spend more time on because it's just easier, right?
And maybe we'll take one little step back beforehand, and maybe you can explain what a VC is and what a VC actually stands for, because I think there's some confusion with what an angel investor is, what a VC is. There's even ways to get social funding now. So maybe you can explain a little bit of that roadmap, and that'll kind of put into the context my next question.
Sure. It's a great question. What is a VC versus an angel versus other ways to raise money? I would say a VC is any institutional investor or any investor that accepts money on behalf of other people in a formal way to make investments in early stage companies. That could take on a couple of forms. There's corporate venture capital, so venture firms that receive money from a corporation, not necessarily, it could be through a fund or could be off their balance sheet, could be in a couple of ways. And then there's your typical, venture capital group that goes out into the world, raises money, they collect all that money in a fund, and from that fund, they make investments in startups. And the way they're compensated essentially is how much money they make for their investors. And if they don't make money for their investors, I guess they're not making much money. They're just making whatever their salaries are. I would say the difference between a venture capital firm and an angel investor is that an angel investor is investing on their own behalf. So they're not raising money from others, they're not collecting a fund. It's more, they're just raising for their own account. I'd say that's the main difference. And typically because of that, angel investors focus on earlier stage investments because the check sizes are usually much smaller. So they can only invest at the early stages.
That's a great example. And I'm glad you clarified that, because it makes a big difference to an early stage founder on where and how they should be approaching this. So let's take you guys as an example. You've kind of defined what types of mistakes are made so the founder can kind of correct those. Now, when they do approach you, when is the right time? Should they be coming after they've already received investment, pre-revenue, post-revenue? Is there a time that you like to focus on and say, not just me, but VCs in general, and then, of course, on you guys?
Right. So there's a couple of things to say to explain when a company wants to go raise funds. The first thing is it's always good to build relationships. So there's no timeline that's good when you need to start building relationships with potential investors, whether they're investors potentially for today or for around in the future. The mistake I think a lot of founders make is that they don't approach the right people, or they don't approach them in the right way. So you should be reaching out to investors that are likely to invest in your company or that fit their mandate. Like, we invest in B2B startups, B2B software startups. If a company that's selling a consumer app comes to us, we're happy to speak with them, we're happy to offer them advice, but we're not going to be investors. Not now, not later, doesn't matter how successful they are. So when a founder is going out and raising money, they should at least look at our website, see what we invest in. right? So they save their own time. They don't have to waste time on us, right? But in terms of when they should go out and start developing relationships, there's no real timeline, I think. For us, is my philosophy and some of the people I know in the space, it's our job to go find founders before they're ready to raise money so that when they're ready to raise, we're there. We've seen how they develop at least over a year. And that's usually the best way to make investments. But I would say if it's more of an acute question, they need to raise money, when should they start? You should leave yourself 6 months from start to finish. I would say that would be a good, if everything is lined up, you have all your information ready, you're hitting the pavement, meeting people, it would take about 6 months from an initial meeting to really close a deal. Maybe sooner if you're lucky, but.
I like that. And to iterate that, it's, I think a lot of startups because this is new to them, they're not always focused on the relationship side. So 100% work on that relationship side, put together the right data room, put together the right information, ensure that you've done a lot of the work so that it's more visible and easier to decompress that as a VC taking it in, and they can maneuver through the environment quicker, faster to learn about you. But again, you're building a relationship. So it's kind of like a drip campaign. You want to give them a little bit, feed it in, get them interested and build that up. And then I liked what you said about the right people, because that also ties into that relationship side, is that it's not really valuable to you to create a relationship with the wrong person that's not going to be able to do much or help you. So you might as well actually start right at the beginning and go after the person that is investing in the space that you're in. They get it. They understand the competitors a little bit easier. So whatever that de-risking mode is, but I like the fact that you're kind of steering them really early on to say, hey, you know what? Build a relationship. Go out and find the right people. It takes 6 months to close a deal, but maybe it might take you longer, but that's fine because they might not come in for the first 2 years anyways, because you got to build that up. So I think that's all super valuable insights. And to kind of keep on that same context is one of the other things that is really important of what you talked about, which was the due diligence and the deep dive information. Can you give us an idea? And again, this is purely from a VC perspective, and the fact that you spent your time in this environment and school and into this, you're like massive professional in this area versus an angel investor who has some ideas of what they're looking for. It's early, but they always say there's not a lot of data. I'm going to kind of take the reverse of that and say there's a ton of data. And from a VC perspective, what things do you look for? And list off 5, 10, whatever you think fits best. But what do you really got to see, and what things can you push a startup to say, you know what, don't even bother coming to me if I don't see this, and I'm going to be harsh, but what are those things that really stand out to make a difference?
It's a great question, because due diligence is such a subjective thing. But I think there are some through lines that I've experienced myself working with different people, different firms, and co-investing with others. I would say a few things. One, there needs to be confidence in the team. And this has multiple points. We're investing in a team, especially in the early stages. Most people are investing only in the team. And we need to have confidence that you're going to deliver, you're honest and transparent, you're treating the capital in a respectful way. So again, I can go into more detail what I mean specifically by these, but we need to have confidence in the team. Sometimes that includes having reference checks. It includes, getting information in a timely way and in a clear way. One thing I really is a red flag for us is when we feel like information is being obfuscated, when the founder's not being forthcoming with questions. I remember on a couple of calls, I would ask, hey, what's your revenues today? And the founder goes into a 5-minute dissertation on, how their projections are true. And I would have to ask again, okay, but what's your revenues today? And then they would answer something completely different, right? Why they think that customers really like their product. Say, okay, but what are your revenues today? Right? So that's the team. And then because most investors aren't going to be an expert in the technology, and that would include us, we're experts in building and selling software, but we don't go into detail in technical due diligence. It's not what we do. So what we need to establish is that your product works, customers like it, and you can deliver. You can deliver on sales, you can deliver on your contracts, et cetera. And that usually comes in the form of some traction and customer references. So we'd like to see, let's call it a few $100,000 in recurring revenues from your main target market at least, so that we can establish that you can do all those things. The product works, your customers like it, and that you can deliver. Aside from that, there's typical standard due diligence stuff like looking at competition, looking at the market size, which is important. And we want to have a deal that makes sense as well. So the deal process and negotiating a term sheet is very important as well.
I like that. And there's one thing there's a couple of things that really stand out about what you just shared. And one of them is you can deliver. Can you dive into that one? Because it's really dear to my heart. But what do you mean by you can deliver?
So this can take many forms. When I say can a entrepreneur deliver, there's a few ways that kind of takes hold in reality. One is, can you deliver sales? You get a contract signed. Number one, to get a contract, you need to go out there and sell. And two, you need to deliver the contract. You need to deliver what you said you're going to do. And those aren't trivial things. Sometimes we have founders coming to us and say, well, we need the funding to go get sales, right? And that's just, in most cases, not a very good answer, right? You have to show some grit, some determination, some creativity in getting those sales in a cost-effective way. Another way of delivering is, I'll give you an example. Like we've dealt with entrepreneurs, we've talked to them over a year before we make an investment, let's say, and we're getting updates regularly, right? So we see over time what their projections were, what they said they were going to accomplish, and then we see what happens in a year. So delivering is not just can you say what you're going to do, but what kind of goals are you setting out for yourself? Some entrepreneurs make very unrealistic expectations and projections, and that's also a red flag, no matter how justified they think it is. We prefer entrepreneurs that are very realistic about their goals. Those goals are based in reality, and that even if they're not hitting their goals, they're getting close. There's a reason why they haven't hit it. Not just that they assume they're going to get to $1 billion in 2 months, right? There has to be something real behind what they set out and what they've achieved or the lack thereof.
So in that same context, and those are great. I like the idea, or like the concept around, proving, going out to market, selling, documenting it, prove that you're hitting your target market. And I think one thing you really hit the home run on this one was when you're asking a question inside of a pitch, in a debrief, or anything you're doing, this goes to selling or anything you're doing, be direct. Just get to the point. Help the person understand quickly. You don't need to always be educating. It's not about how much smarter can I be and sharing out more data, but how can I be direct? How can I move the needle forward and get people interested in what I'm doing? And that comes from simplicity and being direct, I guess, to say that word one more time, because it is important. So you're delivering, you're being direct. You're going to really support that team. How does an early stage company deliver a great team? If they're early, how does that come about? Like, what should they do? Should they, I remember seeing this and hearing this in some of your other interviews. Is it, and you mentioned it, taking grandmother's money and making sure that you're driving this home. It's the perception of that, but how should the startup look at building a team? Because you're right, it's the most crucial part. And how do you get those great people to support that founder or founders?
That's the $1 billion question, I would say. How do you build a good team? And then how do you project that it is a good team to the people you need to convince? It's a tough question. I think what you've done in the past is the first step. You have to establish that that there's a reason that you're the right person to win this space. If there's no good narrative why you're the right person to build this product and sell this product, it's hard to understand why we should bet on you, right? So typically we look for people that have been successful in some startup before, or have deep industry knowledge, or have some other success or education or expertise that they are leveraging now into this business. And that's typically the kind of, like, there's a myth that people invest in people right out of college for the next Facebook. That probably happens, but not that often. We're investing in seasoned people that are building products because they have a deep understanding of their industry and their customer base, right? And those people understand how to build those products because they're living it, right? Those are the types of people we like to see. And then there's a good narrative around why they're the right person to actually build this company. So that's the first thing, is their past, what they've accomplished before. But also it's what they're doing with this business today. And I wouldn't overlook how something like sales or capital efficiency, how much money it's taken them to get to where they are. That's a very important data point for us. Or how the kind of people they were able to convince, what kind of salaries they're paying them, what kind of options they're giving them. There's a lot of ways to kind of to assess from I wouldn't call it an objective point of view, but there's a lot of data points that we collect in a subjective way to determine, are these the right founders? Is this the right team? And one of those, I'll give you a quick example. If you have a founder that was able to convince a couple of people to join them as co-founders, or they've been able to get very high quality talent with little money, by selling them on the vision or offering them shares or something like that, it screams a sophisticated person that is able to establish a vision to people that are talented, and that's what we want to see.
I love that. That's a great way of doing it. It is looking at the backgrounds of the co-founders and of other people that are currently on the team that you can see, and be thinking to yourself, wow, that person just came from their MBA working at as a business analyst, probably making 100,000. They've taken a pay cut to be here. This is impressive. What did they do that I'm not seeing? So it gives you a reason to dig in. And I think that's very valuable. And I think a lot of founders probably don't look at it that way, but in the world of hustle and trying to come up with the best program, there are people out there that want to follow your dream and follow your vision because they see that as being a problem that they want to solve and be part of that bigger vision, even if it's earlier on when it is more of that hustle and grind to get clients.
Exactly. That's why capital efficiency is an important metric for us. What does the founder accomplish or founders accomplish with little money, or with the money that they've received? Can they build a good team? Can they go out and get sales? Can they build a good product? If you can do that in a way that's not spending millions and millions or tens of millions of dollars, that's a great data point. That tells us that you're a good founder. You're someone we want to invest in and do business with.
I like that. That's fantastic. Okay, now to kind of take it a little bit step further in this, and they've engaged you, they've got everything working, and you're getting into this real deep due diligence. How much of your background as an entrepreneur comes into the effect now? How much of that balance between, okay, I can understand that mistake, versus I got to take my VC hat off now, and maybe on the VC side, you got to be really tough and stringent on the process and the policies. How much of that entrepreneur hat comes in, and you kind of can see where they're coming from, and you have that emotional quotient that you're filling for the entrepreneur? How much balance do you see between the two and your background coming into this when you're analyzing a company?
Fantastic question. In terms of how much my entrepreneurial experience plays into our due diligence, if I was being honest, I would say probably 10%. I don't think there's a number out there, but there's a reason for that. I think that where it adds value is perhaps my BS meter. I think I have a little bit more of a refined BS meter because I've done some of the things that they're trying to do. And not that I've done it particularly successfully or at the scale that they're looking to do it in. So I'm not going to overplay that. But the fact that I've been involved in many companies before as an investor or personally, when something doesn't smell right, I can generally pick it out. Not always, but I've done it before. I've been able to say early on in the process and been proven right a couple of times where say, this doesn't make sense. There's something missing here. They're either they're not being transparent or honest, or there's a bigger problem. I've been right a couple of times when it comes to that. And I think that's the combination of my experience as an entrepreneur and the fact that I've, invested in several companies in the past.
And that makes sense. And I'm glad that there is a percentage that you use, because if you were like, no, I'm 100% VC, I don't even wear the entrepreneur hat anymore. It's tough to relate in that sense, but it also can't be 50%, because then you're not swinging in the right way, where it's just understanding the numbers and the factual data that's proofing where this company's going. So I think that's probably a fair balance for how you're looking at a startup from an entrepreneurial eyes perspective, but also from a VC. And that's interesting to learn and understand, because I'm sure a lot of VCs who have never been angels, when you're looking at it purely at 100% VC, you don't actually get to see what a market is. You're so kind of structured in this bubble that you may not get that outside experience. And maybe you lose a few opportunities because you couldn't see where they were coming from. And that entrepreneur has actually, got something great here, but you're kind of stuck in this box. So you may lose great opportunities at the same time.
Right, exactly. And it's interesting because, at the risk of saying something that I'll get fired from, I do think that a lot of what we do as venture capitalists is just common sense. I don't think there's a particular skill set or education, maybe on the finance side a little bit, you can learn, but you can learn that stuff pretty quickly if you're, try hard enough. This is common sense stuff. If you're going to put in your own money, you're going to ask the same questions we ask. I guess it's just a matter of seeing enough businesses and being involved in enough deals that gives you that extra experience, right? But I don't think there's anything we do as VCs that is so sophisticated or complicated.
Wholeheartedly agree. I do think that there is an element of learning. Because you're part of multiple companies, you can really take that educational piece. And I think that really brings a lot of value to a VC, is that the more companies you work with, the more companies you invest in, board seats, advisor, observer roles, all of these things play into understanding different verticals, understanding different ways to compete, different ways to market. And I think that really builds up the credibility, not only on your side, but as the firm, and it helps you better position yourself on when you are going after opportunities. One day we'll go back and look at it and say, how successful were our choices, and how well did we play, and which ones did we miss on, and how well did they grow? And maybe there's a fine balance to come back and say that, we're batting 50%, and that's pretty significant, and that's a great position to be as a VC.
That's exactly right. So if I were in a job interview, for example, if I was in a job interview, for example, I wouldn't play up my education or something. I would play up my experience, because that's at the end of the day what matters. It's the fact that I've been involved in dozens of deals and seen how it goes when you think the best company you're investing in goes to zero, and one of the ones you're kind of worried about go to 100. It's that experience, being in the trenches with the entrepreneurs, seeing how things play out. That's what makes me a bit cynical today. When someone gives me a projection, I just, I know where it's going. I know never are the projections true. They could sometimes, in 1 in 100 cases, be better than the projections, but they're never true. So if I were to ever explain what makes, let's say, Verstra good at what we do, or why I guess I'm still employed in the venture world, it's probably because of my experience and not because of the education, the raw education on how to do a financial model or something.
Yeah, for sure. You were able to keep layering on top of that, right? You learn a base, and then you just keep layering on. And the faster you move and the more you take in, the better you're going to be at picking winners. And, that might not be proven until maybe 20 years in this, but you'll prove a lot of great winners into that time period, but you're only refining your skill sets and your experience and getting better. So I think that's incredible and amazing to learn about. So we're going to kind of shift a little bit in a second here, but I wanted to, before I ask you this one more entrepreneurial heartfelt question, I've got one kind of thing that is, maybe it's 5 things or 3 things you can just ramble off that startups should look for and make sure that they do when they're pitching a VC or an angel, that they want to make sure they nail. Anything that you can come to think of mind that just says, they have to have this. If they don't even pitch. You're gonna waste your time.
You mean in terms of the raw characteristics of the business, or the pitch itself?
More of the raw business stuff, the things that just kind of snap out that you want to see. Like, you need to know what the burn rate is. You need to know how much money they've spent over the last however long. You need to know the revenues. I don't want to answer all your questions, but you know what I mean? Like that kind of idea, right? You have
to be solving a problem. That's the first thing. If you're not solving a problem that's acute, that you can measure in some way, what are you doing, right? And I think it goes over a lot of people's heads. Most founders that have a good product have thought that through, but have a problem that you're solving, know the problem, be able to explain it very well, and be able to measure it in some way. It's very not easy to do, but be able to measure it in some way. The other thing is that you should probably know who you're selling to. And this is tied to the problem, but some people, some founders haven't figured out what exactly their market is, who their target market is, and what that looks like in terms of numbers. And everyone should figure out who you're selling this to, who's your ideal customer. And third is that you have to have a team that at least, whether it's co-founders or call it, first hires, whatever that may be, a team that's well-rounded. So we shouldn't have to ask the question, okay, you're going to build this sophisticated technology, but who on your team is going to do it? It should be obvious. It should be part of your pitch. You should have already thought of it. It should be on your roadmap, or should you already brought them in as co-founders or as hires?
I love it. Best number one answer. Make sure you're solving a problem. Be able to measure it. And then have an obvious team that's going to be able to solve this problem so that you guys can get behind it. So perfect. Love that. All right. So now we're going to and these are all great answers. I think very educational. I think lots of people are going to learn a lot about how a VC works and the mindset of a VC. Now, in all the time that you've been doing this, you've come across lots of different entrepreneurs and how they operate and function. So I'm kind of looking for this heartfelt story where you just were blown away by what this entrepreneur had to do in order to survive, win, grow, and crush it. And it doesn't have to always be a crush it story, but we like energy and great stories. But is there a story that just pops in your mind that really just shows what it takes to be an entrepreneur and it's just stuck by you and it made you kind of think, that, wow, this is impressive?
It's an amazing question, and I want to give I'm going to give an answer that's more recent because our societies went through some trauma recently, right? So that really, at least the first months, in March and April last year, we're kind of figuring out, okay, what's going to happen with our portfolio? What's going to happen with all the people working for the companies? We're asking a lot of questions. And we were worried about one company in particular because they were in the hospitality space. I'll name them. It's called Hire Staff. And there's a young entrepreneur. She's very talented. Her name is Europa Stein. And I was the most worried about that company because the industry itself was going to zero. And we just invested in the company and we weren't sure what to do. And seeing how that company, its management team, its founder adapted to the situation has been incredible. I was quite impressed. I mean, the burn rate was kept low. She was able to pivot. She was able to hire staff during the time. She didn't actually have to fire. There was a couple of layoffs, but overall, those are layoffs probably going to happen anyways. And we've actually increased headcount over the last year or so. And seeing how she's really had this determination to get things done despite the challenges, cut her own salary. Like she did whatever she had to do to make sure that the business survived, that the company kept moving forward with developing its product, getting customers. It was an incredible story. And, we're still not out of the woods yet, but considering what we've experienced, I really want to share that story.
I love that. And you said something that really, really stands out there. And she cut her own salary. And what I love about that is that she did whatever she needed to do as being an entrepreneur. And that's the type of entrepreneur that gives me goosebumps. I literally have goosebumps because those are the people that see that this is their business. This is call it their baby, but they're doing whatever it takes to win. And winning sometimes is having to cut your salary, put more time in, work more efficiently, more hours, ask for help, reach out to more people. So I love that. I think that's a fantastic story. And it really does resonate that, it takes a lot to be an entrepreneur. This isn't a cakewalk and people aren't just splashing money all over the place. It really is a grind and you got to do the right things to survive.
100%. And one of the ways I kind of felt that she would be this kind of entrepreneur was that she was very careful in how she spent the money she's raised in the past. Not that they've raised a lot of money in the past, but they were very careful with their budget and how they approach sales and product development and all those other things so that, in a crisis situation that they're going to respect your capital, that they're going to treat it right and they're going to do whatever they can to ensure that the business has the best chance of doing well.
I love it. Fantastic story. And I'm glad to hear Hire's doing well. I actually had it on my list because I wanted to ask the question, but I've never actually in a podcast interview been able to get myself to ask about a company that is being invested into. But because of, I guess, all the things I know about the company and thought it was pretty awesome company, I just wanted to know, and I'm glad you brought that up. So fantastic. So we're going to kind of jump right into these rapid fire questions. And if you're ready, we'll jump right into them. Yeah.
Go for it.
All right. First question, number one. How did you get started investing in startups?
Through my father's business. I got involved during the summer at university, one summer in university in his business, and he acquired his first company, and I was deeply involved in that process. And it was one of the most exhilarating experiences of my life, learning how to make investments and integrating companies and, all the challenges that come along with that.
That's amazing. Nobody gets that kind of experience, man. You're getting M&A work in university. That's brilliant.
I was very fortunate that way, yeah.
Very cool. That's awesome. Very exciting. What's your favorite part of investing?
People. We meet some of the most incredible people.
Great answer. How many companies do you invest in per year?
4 to 6.
Love it. Any verticals you like to focus on?
I particularly like prop tech. That's my own bias, but we like any company that is vertically focused. That's our specialty. We only invest in B2B software companies that are zealots when it comes to their industry. That's the way I like to put it. They're so zealous when it comes to getting that particular customer base. I
love prop tech. I've got prop tech for you. We're going to talk about that offline, but I'm a huge fan of prop tech myself. Big fan. Love it. And we talked about some of these before, but just to put some more emphasis on them, on the due diligence requirements, is there anything that you look for, and how long does it take you to do your due diligence before making an investment?
So we look for all the things. we turn the business upside down as much as we can. We want to address all the questions that we think are appropriate, from product to team to tech to competition, market. We go pretty detailed, because when we go to our investment committee, they ask the tough questions, and if we're not prepared, we get a no, and that's months of work gone down the drain. And it takes us about a month to do proper due diligence, I would say, from A to Z.
Okay, perfect. Outside of your regular due diligence materials, like outside of team and things like that, is there any legalities that you look for and paperwork in that sense? Do you want to make sure that the founder owns 90% of the company? Like, are there certain details around that you really look for because it makes a difference when you guys are making an investment?
I would say that there are certain things, like we do want the founding team to have enough skin in the game. But other than that, I don't think there's much. We don't have too many standards. We want to make sure that the corporation is clean and everything is done properly. But aside from that, we're pretty laid back.
Okay, I like the skin in the game part. It does make a big difference. Do you guys lead rounds?
Yes.
Perfect. Do you reinvest, and what percent?
We definitely want to reinvest in the companies that are doing well. We haven't had the chance to. Well, some of our companies are going to probably raise a Series A later this year or early next year. And we look forward to doing that if we can. We're definitely interested, and we have the capital to do it.
Awesome.
Percentage, we're not, from in our point of view, a good investment is a good investment at $10 or $10 million. So whatever amount makes sense at the time.
Okay. Any terms that you prefer? Pref shares, common shares? Are you fans of safes?
So we'll do almost anything except safe. I'll never say never, and that we would never do it, but it kind of makes the safe structure doesn't make too much sense to me. It's neither debt nor equity, and it doesn't offer too much protections for the investor. But otherwise, we're happy to do any deal that makes sense. And it's somewhat of a negotiation. We obviously have some standards we want to see, but we just want to make a deal that's fair, market, and that works for both sides.
Perfect. And last question, do you take board seats?
Yes, actually, it's not like we would never do a deal without a board seat, but it's one of the requirements our investment committee wants us to have before they approve a deal. Can there be a situation later on if we're doing a small part of a much larger round? It's possible that we won't require it, but because of who our parent company is, we can bring a lot of value to the table, and we want to see that the other side considers us as bringing value. It may not be that we bring value to them, and that's just that could be true, but if that's the case, then we probably shouldn't be investing. So if the company doesn't see us adding value and we can't justify that we're adding value beyond the capital enough, at least to get a board seat, then it's probably not a good partnership anyways.
Perfect. Awesome. All right. Well, those pretty much sum up our rapid fire questions. We're going to jump right into the personal questions. So yes. All right. First question. What's your favorite sports team?
Oh gosh, it was the Raptors up until a couple of years ago. I said after they won the championship, it was the Raptors, and then last year just stopped watching NBA. So
yeah, the COVID really kind of changed the whole sports viewing feel, right?
You think it'd be the opposite, like more people will watch sports, but I actually noticed the opposite. But yeah.
Yeah, I kind of did the same. My attention span for it kind of just dwindled down. I'm going to have to figure out how to pick it back up. But Raptors are fantastic.
I just watch the highlights, 5 minutes. I get the same value out of watching the highlights than watching the entire game.
Well, hopefully that's not what it turns out to be. That basketball is a 5-minute game now, and we're like, no, that's good. That's good. That's all I need.
Right.
Favorite movie, and what character would you play in the movie?
Oh goodness, I would have. I actually have a list of like my favorite movies somewhere, because I don't know why. That's just something I did at some point. I have many favorite movies. I'd say one of the ones that comes to mind right away is the Lord of the Rings trilogy. It may be like a cliche, but I really love that trilogy. It's just so well made. It holds up to today's standards. I think the story is great. I think the novels are even better, but the fact that it was adapted into this amazing trilogy is quite amazing. And in terms of the character I would play, I want to be Aragorn, but I think I'd be the steward of Gondor, probably. Just like the guy that's already there and just, doesn't want the king to come back. But, I'll say I want to be Aragorn because he's pretty cool.
Aragorn. I like it. I'm actually watching that movie tonight. I downloaded it. Yeah, because I have to use, I don't have my Netflix, my PS4 set up. So I have to actually use my phone in the Google box. And I actually downloaded from Apple. So I'm really going to watch that tonight. So fantastic movie. I completely agree with you.
Have you not seen it before?
Many times, but I'm a fan. So I want to watch it again. You have to find a chunk of night where you got 4 hours because it's a pretty long movie.
Right. You're watching the extended. Right. You're watching the extended version.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah. That's the right way to do it.
Yeah. So because of that, you got to really find a lot of time. So, but either way, also a fan of that. All right. Last question. What is your superpower?
Oh, goodness. What is my superpower? It's a fantastic question. I would say my superpower is the ability to learn. I traditionally and historically, I don't think I'll give you a small example. I don't think I would have considered myself an analytical person growing up. But for whatever reason, because I knew it's something I need to develop, a skill, I've trained myself to think like an analytical person. I still don't think I am, but I've trained myself over the years to think like one and always stop and ask myself, how would an analytical person think of the situation? And that's kind of how I hope, at least in certain situations, that it matters, that's the way I act. But it's an act. It's purely an act that I've developed over the years. So.
Well, that's a good skill to have. That's how this brain works. So I'm like that. But you know what? If when you have and build those skills, that's what it's all about, right? So challenge yourself and keep learning and growing. So fantastic. Well, Matan, I want to say it's been a pleasure. It's been awesome. I always say I won't take notes, but I have to show it. This is my favorite part, was I write like crazy. So you're wondering, what's the guy doing over there? I'm taking notes, but old school in that sense. But I want to thank you very much for all your time. You shared a lot of very valuable insights into the life and world of a VC. And kudos to you guys and the success and the great companies that you guys are working with. Like we like to do in our podcast is we want you to share the last word. Anything you want to say to startups or to investors, I turn it over to you. And thank you again for your time today.
First, Jeff, thank you so much for having me and hosting me. It's always a pleasure to talk about Verstra and what we do. My last word is like, here's my last word. I've learned early on, for one reason or another, I don't know, I was blessed really to have a lot of good mentors and people around me, that there's something called goodwill. It's an accounting term that expresses value that's not exactly tangible, right? There's goodwill also that exists between people, and almost every interaction you have with another person either creates more goodwill or creates a deficit of goodwill. And you go around life meeting people and doing business and having relationships, and in the background, somewhere in the netherworld, exists this balance of goodwill that exists between you and every single person you've interacted with. And if your interaction with someone is positive and you either do something for them or they do something for you, or you have you smile at them or you just treat them nicely, you increase that goodwill. And that is a real, that is an intangible and very valuable thing to have in life. So much so that so much of whatever I can be considered successful for has come from, and I can trace it. I can actually trace it to the goodwill I've developed with people over the years. So if there's one message I want to give out to anybody that's watching this, it's think about life as the constant development of goodwill with other people, meaning that any interaction you have, try to make it a positive one. Even if someone's giving to you, let's say someone's doing you a favor, just thanking them and writing them, let's say, even a handwritten thank you card. That can actually restore some of the balance of goodwill, or at least being more open to doing them a favor in the future, right? But every interaction, or trying to find a way to do them a favor, right? Always try to develop a positive balance of goodwill, not only because in a pragmatic sense, it'll benefit you very much so in the future, but because it'll make you live a better life. And if we start thinking about our lives that way, it's like, how do I just make sure that even if I'm the taker, so to speak, in this interaction, how do I make sure that my balance of goodwill is at least balanced, or that I increase my balance of goodwill?
Brilliant. I love it. And very well said. I think the world can all learn from that and share a little bit more and be a little bit more goodwill. And you know what? You're banking all the way along, but keep giving it away. And sometimes it does come back, but don't look at that. Just look at what you can give. So I love it, man. Well said. Thank you again very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff.
Well, that was a great interview with Matan. I really like the fact that he comes from both sides, entrepreneur, VC, really enthralled and dived right into this VC world, wanted to be there from when he was younger. And I guess the best part about this is that he was able to share a lot of real key information, which was, how do we demystify when you should go and speak with a VC? And he blatantly shared right away, anytime is good. Go out, create a relationship, start that conversation. It doesn't mean you have to pitch them today. You can be pitching them in a year from now. But start getting those relationships, communicate, build that up, build your team up, find ways to bring in the right people to grow that business, which is, again, fantastic. Learn to steward your capital. Another great line he said, that is important. You got to figure out how to balance your business. And the best part of when he was talking about hire, what she did as a founder to really take control of her business, and just by cutting her own salary and doing the right things allowed her to make the business sustainable. And that's what it takes to be an entrepreneur. So I loved it. It was a great conversation, great learning. And again, thank you very much. Please like, share, comment, and we look forward to seeing you at the next event or podcast. Have a great day.